I was 23 years old and wanted to rent a small apartment. I had just finished college and didn't have much money. I only earned a little more than the lowest wage, so I needed a really cheap place. At first, I searched for one-bedroom and studio apartments, but soon realized they were too expensive for me. So, I reluctantly checked Craigslist, even though I heard it wasn't very trustworthy. But a friend said it worked for them, so I decided to try it. On the first day of searching on Craigslist, I didn't find anything suitable, but I noticed there were many listings available. Unfortunately, they weren't in my area or within my price range. However, on the third or fourth day, I saw a new listing that caught my attention. It was for a place a few miles away. I clicked on it and saw it was a studio in a small apartment building. The pictures were blurry, so I couldn't see much detail, but everything else seemed good. I messaged the owner, and he replied quickly. We arranged to visit the apartment later that day, around 7 o'clock. After our quick exchange, the guy seemed normal. His messages were polite, and he was eager to show me the apartment. A couple of hours later, I hopped in my car and headed to the address he gave me. I already knew it wasn't the best part of town, but it was the cheapest, and I didn't think it was too bad. Looking back, maybe I was just being naive because it was my only choice. I drove to the apartment building, which looked quite old. After parking on the street, I texted the man to let him know I had arrived. I walked up to the front door but didn't see him around. I pressed the buzzer and waited. The door unlocked, and I entered. Inside, there was a staircase with rooms on each side. Before I could check the room numbers, I heard a voice from above the staircase telling me the apartment was on the 3rd floor. Assuming it was the man, I started climbing the stairs. But I began to wonder why he didn't meet me at the door, especially after being so professional in his messages. At the top of the stairs, there was a short hallway with 2 doors, one of which was open. I approached and peeked inside. There was a man standing there who greeted me and shook my hand. He invited me in, but I was puzzled. The place looked like someone already lived there, with a couch, TV chairs, and food on the counters. Does someone else live here? I asked politely. The man chuckled and assured me that nobody lived there and everything would be cleared out by the next day. I nodded and smiled, but his response didn't sit right with me. He continued showing me around, but it suddenly hit me that this wasn't just a studio apartment. There were multiple doors leading to other rooms, suggesting it was at least a 1 or 2 bedroom place. There was no way it could be as cheap as he claimed. He must have noticed my suspicion because he stopped talking and headed towards the hallway. He opened one of the doors, presumably to a bedroom, and urged me to take a look inside. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. I checked it and froze. It was a message from the Craigslist man asking where I was. Panic washed over me as I realized what was happening. It was clear that the person in front of me wasn't who they claimed to be, and they knew I had caught on. After a terrifying moment of silence, the guy didn't move or say anything. He just stared at me blankly. Without hesitation, I hurried out of there and down the stairs, not hearing him follow. I quickly got into my car and drove off, too horrified to even text the real man back. I had no desire to stay anywhere near that place, and I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe he was involved somehow. Whoever that guy was, he came dangerously close to potentially abducting me. I didn't want to know more, and I swore off Craigslist for good after that night. I hadn't visited Craigslist in about 5 years. I had completely forgotten about it, never having any reason to use it and rarely hearing about it anymore. But with my moving plans, I needed to clear out a bunch of random stuff. At first, I considered hiring a junk removal company, hoping they'd take everything. But their estimate was over $400 for just a few items. That's when I decided to give Craigslist a try. I posted a listing offering free stuff and included pictures of everything I was giving away. I figured I'd get a lot of responses from people interested in picking up free items. But to my surprise, I hardly received any responses. And the few people who did respond ended up ignoring me after exchanging a couple of texts. About a week after posting the listing, a man named KJ messaged me. He said he wanted to pick up my couch and was available any day. I didn't expect much, so I didn't make much effort to arrange for him to come get it. I just told him I worked from 9 to 5, so if he wanted it, he should let me know. Surprisingly, the next morning before work, he texted me saying he'd like to swing by that evening. I told him that was fine, and as I left work that night, I sent him my address. The drive home was only about 20 minutes, but I hoped he'd come sooner rather than later. I didn't want to waste my night waiting for him, especially if he didn't end up showing up. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a car parked on the curb next to my house, but nobody was inside. It was the only car parked on the whole street, so I figured it must be KJ. I hurried to my front door, but he wasn't there. There was a small part of me that thought it could be a coincidence and the car belonged to someone else, but I wasn't convinced. Inside, I sent a text to KJ asking when he'd arrive. Then I peeked out the window. After waiting for about 10 minutes with no response and no sign of anyone outside, I tried to calm down and turned away from the window. As I stood in the kitchen, pouring myself a drink, I heard a small thud coming from upstairs. Not knowing what the sound was, I set my drink down and listened intently. After a few seconds of silence, I heard heavy footsteps racing down the stairs. I was completely taken aback, frozen in place as a man dashed down the hallway and out the front door. By the time I reached the door, he was already driving away and the car parked on the curb. I was still in shock, trying to make sense of what had just happened. It all happened so fast. Eventually, I called the police and also tried calling KJ, but he didn't answer. That made me believe even more that it was him who broke in. When the police investigated, they found that KJ's phone wasn't registered to any name or address, so we were back to square one. Despite my efforts to get the police to follow up, nothing came of it. As far as I know, nothing was stolen, so maybe he didn't have enough time, or perhaps he was waiting for me. Maybe the noise I heard was him accidentally giving himself away, so he took off before I could react. Whatever really happened, all I can do is hope that he never returns. In 2018, I went through a divorce that left me with almost nothing. I moved into a small home but had no furniture or appliances. I needed everything. It was a huge challenge, especially financially, so I thought Craigslist would be a great place to find discounted items. My main focus was on getting big items like a couch and a TV, and surprisingly, I found some good deals pretty quickly. I messaged a few sellers and picked up a few things. During my search, I came across a TV stand listed for $40. It looked like a basic wooden stand. The seller, Matt, was very particular about when I could pick it up. He said it had to be after 9:00 because of his work schedule and not on the weekend. It was still okay for me, but I found it a bit strange how specific he was. I guessed that's why it hadn't been sold yet. I agreed to pick it up on a Wednesday at 9:30, and I stuck to the plan. He sent me his address, and I drove 30 minutes to his place. It was a town I'd only heard about but never visited. Soon, I realized why. Most of the homes were old and run down, and even the roads were in bad shape. Many of the streetlights weren't working either. Arriving at Matt's house didn't improve my mood. It looked just as run down as the others, with only a dim hallway light visible inside. I gathered the $40 and tucked the bills into my pocket. Then, I stepped out of my car and walked onto his porch, ringing the doorbell. While I waited, I glanced around at his lawn. There were decorations scattered everywhere, like garden statues and interesting items on the porch. Then Matt opened the door. He was tall and thin, probably in his 40s. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days, and I could smell alcohol on his breath as he greeted me and invited me inside. If I had known beforehand that he was the one selling the TV stand, I wouldn't have come here, but it was too late to change that now. As we walked down the hall, I noticed stuff scattered all around the house. It wasn't quite like the homes of hoarders you see on TV, but more like an abandoned house that had been messed up by random teenagers. When we reached the living room at the back of the house, Matt pointed to the TV stand. The room was dimly lit, making it difficult to see the condition of the stand. "Could you turn on the light, please?" I asked politely. Matt didn't respond but went to the wall and switched on a small lamp in the corner. Around that moment, I got a strange feeling that something wasn't right. Before I could even inspect the TV stand, I heard someone else behind me. Another man had appeared around the corner, standing beside Matt. He didn't greet me, he just stared. I wasn't sure what to think, and I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable as that uneasy feeling intensified. I stood there, trying to figure out what to say or do. Then Matt walked past me and positioned himself in front of the TV stand. They were now on either side of me, facing me in silence. Several tense seconds went by with no one speaking or moving. Feeling uneasy, I swiftly walked past the other guy and down the hallway toward the front door. As I left, I heard them laughing behind me, as if it were some kind of joke. About halfway to my car, the front door slammed shut. I can't make sense of what happened that night or what those two guys were up to. Maybe it was some sick prank they were playing, trying to scare me, or maybe it was something worse. Either way, I don't intend to stick around to find out.